And so I'm going to really quick run through everybody here. My name is Danny Grimes. I'm a professional GM at Gen Con. I run a lot of Call of Cthulhu. I'm also a maker and a terrain builder and model maker and so forth. Matt, Casey Rift, owns and runs Cobalt Con and the Blackwood Society, and he is currently running a Kickstarter, which is funding really well. And we're hoping to make to our stretch goals by the end of the month. So I'll let him talk a little bit about that. And he also owns the game company, Wisco Games. So then I move on to Brian. I see that guy at every convention, Berg. He is also an author and a game designer in the independent publishing space, and he's the owner-operator of Total Party Kill Games, and he helps us a lot around here as a fellow wizard. And Jimmy Duffy, chief...
I'm a reject. Uh-oh. And,
And
he just... and here, where's the professionals?
That's what happens when you call the tech guy a reject.
That is ironic, isn't it?
It's Dorian. He is. Well, folks, you can't script it any better than that.
How long was that?
Well, we
Less
made
than a
it
minute?
about 180 seconds, maybe something like that. Oh, there he went.
And he started his video, so that'll throw everybody off. One moment, please.
I just checked. I think it's Spectrum again in my area. Their outages are just crazy all over the country. We'll have to do something to have a backup. But anyway, I'm very sorry, Jimmy, what I said about you. You're not a reject at all. You are the
Here, like I said, here we go.
You are the most wonderful. Yeah, you are the most wonderful tech admin ever, and thank you for all that you do. So I did lose my. Okay, here we go. We're back.
We're back. Until I go to the 5-person deal. I'll fix it.
Yeah. So real quick, I just want to say we are Wizards of the Couch, and you can find us all over social media as Wizards Couch or Wizards of the Couch. Also, there's a Kickstarter we're going to talk about in a little while. So I'm going to move right ahead and introduce our guest for tonight. With us tonight is Jim Pinto. He is the developer and designer and I think owner and operator, he'll tell you all the stuff, of Protocol Games and Post-World Games. Protocol Games, he'll tell you more about it, but it's a GM-less system, which is something I'm super interested in. And also in his prior life, he was involved with Legend of the Five Rings, Alderac Entertainment, and was the art director there as well. And he's done a lot of stuff in between. It's a long list. One of my favorite books ever, The Toolbox, was put together by him. So we'll talk about that maybe a little bit as well. So, Jim, are you with us?
I am.
Jim is an international man of mystery. Therefore, he has no photo right now. He is just Jim Pinto.
Cue the Austin Powers soundtrack.
And I want to say that I was not responsible for the incorrect current capitalization of your name. I know.
So you die last? Is that?
I die last, exactly. And I'll beg. I might even be able to offer you something, Jim. You don't know.
Whoa, it's an adult show, but settle down over there.
Okay. I just there's going to be stabbing involved. You never know what you do in that clutch play. So we have some standard questions, Jim, that we have that we ask everybody, but I'm just going to call bullshit on those questions. And like, why'd you get into gaming? And what's your favorite part of gaming? All that stuff. We'll probably cover that later. We were chatting earlier in the week, and you brought up something about your opinion about 5th edition. Now, it's not an edition war issue. It's just an opinion.
Right.
So why don't you share that with us, Jim?
I want to back up and say that if you're one of the OSR guys that thinks you need to bring up the same argument about the old way of doing things over and over again, you can probably shut up. You've been heard for the last 10 years. We get that argument.
Yep.
And we've heard all the edition war arguments to death. One of the things I've never heard anybody else say is how the editions have slowly and more further slid into sort of a meta-conferencing style of play where nothing gets done and nobody has any authority to get anything done, but the game master still has the responsibility to make sure that things get done. So as characters get more and more and more powerful in each edition of the game, powers are stripped away from the game master to make things happen. And so now I think 5th edition is a job for game masters. I don't even think it's fun anymore. I think it's something they need to get paid for, because you're there catering to, like a vending machine, to the consumer at the other side of the table. They're not a player, they're a consumer. And they have an expectation. They've written an 18-page background, and these are the magic items they want at these levels. And you got to make it happen like a job. And I find that trend really unsatisfactory for the largest game in humanity.
Do you think it's a function of it growing so popular? Is it just that, or is there a purpose behind that?
I think when it was done in 3rd edition, I think 3rd edition is when the switch flips, and I think that it's purposeful for the purpose of sales.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anybody saw this side effect coming, where the players would feel that you need to cater to their every whim, because they have so many feats and powers and things at their disposal, and anytime you bring something up, they have a power to stop it.
Well, as a semi-grognard, I guess I'm not really a grognard, but I would say that I would think that maybe the idea of video games, the ability to be able to pause, select, quest for specific things, probably had some cultural, like whatever we've done to gather that audience is doing things to us too, right? So where are those influences coming from, or is that not important? Who cares? It is what it is.
Right, and that's all fine and good. If that's where role-playing games are going, we need to acknowledge that that's where they're going, and that the game master's role is now a job, and it's not to be an administrator to have fun and tell a story. It's their job now to cater and build an experience, build a specific experience.
Yep.
That tailors 5 or 6 different personalities at the table. That's work. And
do you think that I guess the trend for the game to be more of a story now, everybody wants to kind of tell a story, and it to be a story time session where we're interacting with each other, but it's really just we're creating something together. Do you think that's kind of the push for it, people's desire to do that, or do you think that it's solely based on sales, like you said?
I think that's a really good question. I think that there's something that needs to happen at a session 0 that doesn't happen in a traditional role-playing game. Nobody sits down and figures out how they know one another. Everybody has already come to the table and written a infallible canonical piece of backstory that cannot be argued with. Oh, well, I killed a dragon when I was 6, and that's how I became a sorcerer. As soon as you write something that's stupid, the game master now has to cater to that stupidity and ramp up the rest of the campaign to reflect what you've done at the age of 6.
So there is a product right there that you could sell gazillion copies of. Put together charts that weave player backgrounds together.
Yeah.
Well, I think, but isn't what Jim's saying? The GM can buy that book and attempt to enforce it, but there's now a serious pushback from people who saw every Marvel movie, every Wolverine movie, and want to have retractable claws. I mean, that's an egregious example, but I'm sure it happens. And so, like, I think, there's always been an asymmetry of the commitment of the GM to the players. So part of me kind of welcomes the fact that they're bringing a game to me. They're bringing something. I just wish that they would, I guess I agree with Jim. I wish they would wait until we're all in the same room so that it's a shared experience.
And I wish that they were doing some level of the work instead of doing just the fun part of it, right?
Yep.
I got to art direct for 8 years, and that art direction is easily the best and most fun job at a game company, so long as everybody around you isn't an asshole. If somebody wants to take that job away from me and just make me do the contract part of it or do the art numbering part of it, that's not fun. And you have to do both of those parts of the job in order for art direction to happen. And I think the game master gets stuck with all of the filing, and the players get stuck with all of the, do this to the sketch and let's add this. And they're the ones that are getting to actually paint the canvas, and the game master is the one that's got to file it away.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Jim, I mean, I totally see where you're going. And I think most big fantasy games are probably 100% guilty of this, right? But I do think 5th edition D&D is probably the simplest edition that's ever been put out.
Sure.
And so it's much faster. It's easier to educate on the fly. The game master can actually tell a story and not trip over the rules and all the bullshit minutia, right? So I know from my own personal experiences, it is fun to run as a game master. And I think that's part of why it's become such a huge monster, is it's accessible and it's much easier than any other edition of D&D ever before.
But you're just speaking about the book and not the entire culture around how 5th edition is played.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And I can agree with you to an extent, right? I've read the book and I played it once, and 5th is a little more elegant than I expected it to be. But you ran it at that con, and there were 3 people at the table that shouldn't have been there, and there were 3 people that should have. And how much did that detract from the quality of what you were trying to do with it? Because they were bringing all their old bad habits, and they were just, okay, just entertain me. I'm just.
But that's every convention, every pickup game.
That is true. Yep.
But I want to get back to what you're saying about the culture, because I came from a background of judging. I was the judge. We called ourselves GMs, but I was a judge. And the rules, I made a lot of those decisions in the clutch. I wasn't beholden to them. And I would highlight in my first edition DMG the part where it says it's just a guideline and all that stuff. And I definitely noticed this change in 3rd edition that you indicated, but also I was really wanting to create experiences. I was kind of thinking of it like a game. I already was to the point where I wanted it to be experiential, not so gamified. And the rules were just there to settle out things that we couldn't just agree on. And I encouraged people to just agree. So are you saying that is it the thing about creating an experience that is drudgery, or is it that it's dictated by the players?
That's a really good. Have you played Apocalypse World?
No.
Okay. Apocalypse World has a really clear, defined role for what's called the master ceremonies, the game master, essentially.
Right. Yep.
You don't really do a lot unless the game is telling you it's time now to get involved. So the players can be these kind of attention hounds in that game, but they have to write and do all the work and and it's only the game master's job to say, okay, now it's time for you to roll dice. Okay, stop talking, now roll dice. And I think that's one of the things that D&D suffers from, because of the 40 years of habits that are built into it. And now you have a new generation coming in with, as you said earlier, their video game habits, and then seeing how much power they can put into their character, how many things that they can do. And I think Pathfinder probably suffered from this as well, because your first level characters can do so much, and they have 20 feats by the time they're 5th level because of how comboing works and whatnot. That every single time you do that, you're just taking more and more authority to get things done from the game master. And
for sure,
it's just a side effect of that level of design. It is. I don't have a solution other than to retrain people how to think about role-playing games, because the book, your anecdote about 1st edition is that they were guidelines and you're there to arbitrate, but that was a social contract that everybody agreed to.
Yes.
We're not agreeing to the same social contract when we sit down to play now, because you will have people that are more than willing to be helpful, and they end up getting overlooked because the loudest guy at the table is getting 40 more extra minutes of gameplay.
Right.
So let's take that in another direction real quick. What is how do you think the online gaming, so the streamed games, the more popular ones, how do you think those have kind of influenced that? Because you've got a ton. I mean, probably the majority of players now are new within the last 5 years, maybe. No, certainly no more than 10. I would say the vast majority of D&D players right now are in that short window that have experienced D&D through the Critical Roles type games. Do you think that is shaping people's perception of what?
It's shaping their expectations.
Sure.
Absolutely. I'm glad you really brought that up, because that's another thing where people don't realize these are actors, and they have prep time to talk about what they're going to do before they get up there and actually pretend they're improvising. And that gives people the impression that, oh, this is what D&D is going to be like when I sit down and play it. And I don't think anybody comes to the table with that level of. Somebody did a MASH role-playing game.
Oh, wow.
And all I could think was the writing on MASH was the best writing of the 70s and 80s on television. How am I supposed to get 5 people who think My Little Pony is good to sit down and write the quality of Larry Metcalf from MASH and write that kind of story with that level of drama and comedy at the same time?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I would never have thought to do a MASH role-playing game.
And part of this, and to those who are watching too, I mean, this conversation is not necessarily being is not necessarily about individual GMs. It's about the fact that we now have a culture of people who run these games. Not a culture. We have a culture of gaming, but we have a whole group, a new cadre of people running these games who run them very differently. And I think what 5e is telling us is that, I think I agree with Jim. It's more of a production for the I'm more of a producer or a director when I'm playing straight 5e with people, rather than like an L5R where it's definitely more story driven to begin with. And the GM in that game is really encouraged to be like involved in judging what's going on. So it's not just an individual game or system. It really is just the way people play these days. So,
to Jim's point, one of the things that really just bothers me about the big fantasy games is that people have, like you said, before even writing any backstory or having any sort of character ideas, they have a build. Okay. And I think if you come to the table with a build, you have already lost the game. You are there to win. You are not there to play. You're not there to experience and have fun and role play. You are there to win. And if that's one thing I could ever do, is to throw that concept out the window, light it on fire.
My game City of Mass that's coming out actually has a section in there called Session 0, and it tells you that you have to make your characters together because so many things are intertwined, and because of the culture of the city and everything else, the players have to know one another, because otherwise you can't play the game.
That's outstanding.
Yeah, so really, I think, isn't what we're boiling this all down to, and this is something I've been doing for a long time. The Session 0 for me usually takes 3 weeks, because we get together and we start kind of slow. We talk about stuff. We just had our first Session 0 on Friday, talking about this new campaign somebody wants me to run, and it all boiled down to us playing Conan, basically. So I'm gonna end up running this Conan thing for 12 weeks, and right away, the conversation over gin and tonics was, okay, not necessarily even how they knew each other, but why they were there. And then how they knew each other bubbled up out of that. And then if they had relationships, good, bad, and different, whatever. Doesn't that solve this problem? Just put out the word that you need to all sit in the same room. You all need to build a shared backstory.
The conceit of D&D in the day was that you were all out for adventure and glory and gold.
Sure.
And that's not the same anymore. That's not true anymore.
No.
Right.
And so if half the table is building characters the old way and half of them are building it, say, the second edition way, right, where everybody's a Ren Fair caricature, you have a different expectation as what the campaign's going to be about from the minute zero.
Right.
Sure.
So yeah, that's I guess I'm agreeing with you, but I'm saying it in a different way.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I think I talked over somebody.
You're fine.
Go ahead, Matt. You were going to say something.
I was, for sure. Go ahead.
I was for sure I had something I was going to say.
It's almost like there's 3 camps that we've kind of doped out here. One is the old, hack and slash, I'm out for adventure guy. There's one that's there for, there's a player that's there to develop their character and their story arc, which is, I think, sounds like the camp that the majority of us are in. And then there's the person who just wants to win D&D. And I don't think any of those are wrong. It's just that if you are diametrically opposed, I don't think that any of them are, none of them are going to necessarily work very well together. all the time, especially at like pickup game like we've been discussing at a convention. But I think if you set those expectations from day one and come to some sort of agreement, you can have a good game.
Can I tell a story?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So I ran D&D 5 at a convention recently. I wrote a story about Vecna. I tried to do the backstory of who he was before he was Vecna. And I did, half the game was told in flashback and half the game was told in media res at that moment as they're at the door to the tomb. And they all had, there was 5 players and 5 characters. They all had backgrounds written up about how they knew each other and why they were here in this moment. And I went around the table and I gave everybody maybe 10 different spotlight moments for their characters, for them to shine and allow them to do something in the role play, do something in combat, do something with their backstory, do something with how they're dealing with the fact that their buddy died before they even got here. And I had a range of different kind of players that showed up for this thing, but everybody walked away with, I've never played D&D that way before.
Yep.
And that, I hope that experience impacted somebody at some level to say, I'm going back to my group and we are not rolling D20s for 4 hours again. We're changing things up. And I think that's really the only tool left we have to make these changes, is to open people up to, it doesn't have, I'm not even say better, I'm saying just a different way of doing things, so they can see that D&D doesn't have to be a pull you by the nose, roll dice for 4 hours kind of game.
Yeah, well, because it's art, right? D&D, role-playing games in general, is art. It is an art form. Everyone begins in a different fashion. Everybody gets different enjoyment out of it. But when you boil it down, I think more and more, thanks to indie games, people are beginning to see that it is really about the role-playing. First edition D&D, you got XP for every gold piece of treasure that you found, right? It was baked into the rules that take stuff and get more powerful, right? 5th edition D&D now, magic items are optional. You don't even absolutely need them to be successful at the game. So it's more about the character. It's more about them. So I think we're seeing positive change, but yeah, absolutely.
I just wanted to, I guess, just to kind of close out this little part of this segment, I would say that what we really maybe need is a someone to put out a list of how to develop those guidelines to get people to do that. Sometimes it's just enough to have a good GM explain it. But like, for example, my way of doing it, I ask everybody to write down 3 things everyone would know about you if they see you, 2 things only your friends know about you, and 1 secret nobody knows. And they write them all down. And I said, we're not going to use all these, but does this give you some idea what your character is? Now write some statements about your character if you can, and start sharing it with other people around the table. And that works great for me and my players, but I bet you there's 20 different ways to do it that would encourage people to this way of thinking.
We do lies also.
Lies.
False truth.
No lie. Yeah.
One of the tools that I put into just about everything, and we were going to talk about protocol at some point.
Yeah, we'll
but I
get to that after the station break, Jim.
I have a game system called Protocol and another one called Praxis. And what I have in those game systems is built-in questions about other people. So I'm answering a question about you. So I have the ability at the beginning of the game, it says, who among you is hunted and wanted for stealing the Queen's jewels? Just as a stupid question off the top of my head. And now I get to pick somebody at the table and identify them as the troublemaker that has gotten us in this situation. And a lot of people who want absolute agency over their character don't like that kind of setup, but it builds immediate relationships and interconnectivity between characters when those questions are pointed that way.
Yeah, and what would be you don't know, nobody knows, but what is the point of that level of agency that they're seeking? Like, is it to just do and say whatever they want with no constraint from the beginning? Because I can't see that being a very long-lived or fruitful way of playing.
I think a lot of it stems from feeling powerless in our everyday lives, and people don't want to feel that way when they sit down.
That's a fucking fact.
That's a whole show in and of itself right there.
We'll have you back, Jim. You can tell us all about the psychological underpinnings of why nerds do what they do. Yeah, that's that. So far, I'm really kind of glad I skipped what got you into gaming, Jim.
So that was the first question. On to question number 2.
Podcasts like this are how I got into gaming.
Yeah, cool. So I want to talk about Jim's latest thing. I don't know how latest it is. I mean, I guess it's been around for a while, but Protocol Game Series is a GM-less game system that I think is super interesting, and I'd like Jim to talk a little bit about it and why that's set apart from other things that have been out there.
When I sat down to make Protocol, this is kind of a long answer. Sorry.
Go.
I hate Fiasco. Let me start with I hate Fiasco. I hate how long it takes to set up. I hate how people treat it like an opportunity to ruin other people's fun. And yeah, I just generally don't like it. I don't like how the book and the example of play don't match up. So nobody knows if they're playing the game correctly. And so I sat down, I played a game called Life on Mars by Ross Cowman, and I saw how elegant and simple he had his rules. And I said, I can do that, but I want to do it with the logic of how a screenplay is written, with the ebb and flow of scenes and people coming in and out, and not everybody is at the table at the same exact time involved in the story. And so I made this system that uses a poker deck, and the deck tells you exactly what kind of scene you're doing and what it's about when you draw the card. So when it's your turn to direct, because everybody takes a turn and you go 4 times around the table, you just draw a card, and each suit is different. It tells you what kind of scene it is. And then depending on the game you're playing, because there's over 60 of them now, the scene chart is different. The focus of the scene changes based on the value of the card. So an ace and a king are wildly different types of scenes. And then you'll draw a second card if you want to that tells you where the scene takes place, which is also a vital part of screenwriting. You need to know where things are happening. And before you even get to that point in the game, you've already made your characters and you've figured out your interconnectivity and everything else. And when I first made it, I wrote it, I think there were 4 pages of rules total. And if you understood the shorthand of how to play an indie game, then there was no need to explain anything. And the longer it was out, the more people that were finding it, I realized I've got to write more rules to explain this. So I've been slowly cleaning up the old ones and making more rules. And I recently did how many pages in it? It's called House of Keys edition of Protocol. I think it's 140 pages. So I've gone from 4 pages of rules to now 140 pages of rules in order to teach people who don't really understand this style of play how to play these kind of games.
Yeah, it is a big departure. Using Fiasco is something that I have played. I generally agree with your criticisms. I can never find anybody who plays it the same way twice. Right. I have a good time playing it. I mean, because we just roll with it. But I get that part. Well, I was just that. I guess that's really all I can say. I mean, playing Fiasco is challenging.
Yeah, and I think it teaches people lots of bad habits. And I've said this before in lots of places. I don't have a problem with Jason per se. So this isn't an attack on him or his game, but I think that Fiasco teaches people if this is their first story game or their first indie game, it teaches them all kinds of bad habits about how to play these games. And it takes a while for them to start playing games with better social contracts and realize, oh, I'm not supposed to be pissing all over somebody's fun. I'm supposed to be helping build the story. We're all sharing in the responsibility here.
Right.
And are there rewards for that sort of behavior built into the game?
There aren't. That's one of the inherent problems, right? Is I have to write the statement. The only reward is a good story. If you write a good story, the only reward is get a good story. And because Protocol games each one is so narrow, it's essentially a mini module for D&D if you're playing a fantasy one, right? That if I want to make a bevy of different fantasy games, they essentially end up becoming different kind of modules. They don't become campaignable things because you're telling the entire story and you're done and these characters' lives are irrevocably changed by what they've gone through in these events. And so you can't take those same characters and go, oh, okay, now we're going to go off and do this other protocol that Jim wrote. It just wouldn't make sense.
So that actually leads right into my next question. With regards to your protocol games, or really any indie game that you're publishing, Jim, how do you distill out the Dungeons and Dragons from your own games and stories? And then what tips do you have for others who want to reach into other genres and not be tethered by those Tolkien-esque ideas?
My hope is that the setup inside any one of my protocols is enough fuel to get you started, boom, in that first scene ready to go, right? You have 15 minutes of setup versus, say, the hour it takes to set up for a fiasco. You have your character, you have their motivation, you have their relationship to somebody else at the table. You've answered a world building question. You've read the plot, and you've done the opening scene, which doesn't count as somebody's turn. And now you're ready to go. And all of that, if you know what you're doing, should only take 15 minutes. And maybe 30 the very first time you sit down and play a protocol. But hopefully, if I've done my job properly as a writer, I've baked all that in, Ryan, so that you're ready to go. You have all the tools.
Gotcha.
And if I have a strength as a writer, and I don't know if I do, I'm probably just being pedantic, but if I have a strength as a writer, it's understanding genre, and it's understanding that the kinds of questions that go into a horror game are very different than the kinds of questions and structure that go into a fantasy.
Right. Yeah, I think it's a really it's a tough thing too, just from an industry perspective of moving away from 5e, because that's where the big pool is. If you want to write stuff, my advice that I've always heard, and I guess I've given on several occasions, is just write what you want. You know, if it's what you know and it's what you love, you got to kind of set aside other concerns and not necessarily go for people who like playing 5e, because those people might want a completely different experience. They obviously do.
Do you feel like there's people that are, I guess, going back to D&D, do you feel like it's kind of maybe a gateway drug for all these, for would-be gamers who want it? They come in because they like something, they've seen something that they want to experience. Maybe D&D doesn't actually get them there, and so they want to go into more of a storytelling type game. I mean, do you see this influx? I guess ultimately the question is, do you see this influx of players into another game as beneficial to the hobby as a whole?
Is the rising tide lifting your ship, yo?
I don't have a lot of customer overflow, if that kind of addresses the question. I don't see a lot of people falling into D&D and then saying, I want to go and try something else. I think people are very protective of their free time, and they don't want to take chances or experiment with that free time with something new. I think once they find something that works, they stick with it. Even if they're getting a C+ gaming experience, that's better than risking getting a D+ gaming experience from something else. Even if you could get an A out of it. I think they're willing to gamble just about anything else, but they're not willing to gamble their free time. And so I don't know if that answers your question.
No, that answers it for me.
That was a good question, but it was a tough question.
Well, that's precisely why you need to record some of your games, Jim. Put them on the interwebs and let people see what it's like.
There is a group of people that played Protocol. They played it a little wrong, but it's the best video on the internet for playing Protocol. And if you go to any of my protocols on Drive-Thru RPG, the video is at the bottom of the product. So you can just click on it and go watch it.
Fantastic.
But I write really developed examples of play in each of my books. So you know how an interrogation scene goes. You know how an interlude scene goes. So as long as you know what the process of role-playing is, where we're talking to one another and we're sussing out the drama between us, I don't see that you really need any other hand-holding other than understanding no one person is in charge.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Right. Well, it definitely overcomes those points you made, or at least one of those points you made earlier about authority.
Right.
Like, it creates a delineation of authority in the group. Everybody knows when they are, I don't know if it's in charge, but I guess if they're the director, then they're in charge.
Right.
So is it creating that, it's the collaborative, it's almost like a table read where the script is just evolving as you go. You just put people around.
That's a great description.
Right? So is there any way to extend it? Or, I mean, you said it wouldn't make sense, but there's no way to extend it to people who might want to have more immersion in a particular storyline? Or is it just at the end, it's the end, start over next time for 3 hours?
I don't know how I would do it without it getting repetitive. The charts themselves only have 13 different scene focuses. So in order to do that, I would have to make a new chart for every game session.
I've read Toolbox, dude. You will make a chart for anything.
Oh, sure. And each of these books comes with a dozen charts. So I have no problem making charts. It's just tailoring a new chart to a group for a session I wasn't at to know how it exactly ended. That's a lot of work, right? Knowing what the next scene chart needs to be after, let's say they played home, the very first protocol I ever made, and they've lost the war. They finally have made it home after all these travails, and now nobody in the town wants them to stay there, and so they're on their own again. I have to make a very specific chart to that ending, and that's not easy to do.
So on the topic of charts, I just got to give Schwalb his due. I was creating a character, and granted, it's Shadow the Demon Lord. It's meant to be dark and somewhat humorous, but I was rolling up a goblin, and he kind of has some fun little backstory charts in there. And the thing that I had just randomly rolled up was that I was the love slave of a hag. Never ever done that in any game ever before. So
right,
way to get your character, the player, invested immediately.
I think that would be an excellent tool for D&D players, is teaching them the 3 dimensions of character development: who you are, what it is you want, and why you can't get it. And if anything, if I could build any tool for 5e, it would be that. Because the not knowing why you can't, what's in your way from getting what you want has always been left up to the game master to throw in front of you again and again and again and again and again. And if it's something inside of you that's stopping you from getting what you want, that's a million times better drama in a story than if the game master just throws another Hydra in your way from getting whatever.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have that.
I think all the best moments in RPGs, I think I almost could flatly say, are question asking. Like, the resolutions of things are not nearly, at least for me, not nearly as interesting as the posing of the questions in the first place and the creation of the challenges. It's fun when you overcome them, but it's often just as fun to be set upon by, bad luck or whatever the case may be.
Let me just say this about everything that I've said today. If you're a gamer that's never had that holy shit moment in a role-playing session where the light goes off and you realize what the potential of role-playing games are, if you've just been playing Let's Go Kill the Orcs for 20 years and you've never had that aha moment, none of this is going to make any sense, because you don't expect D&D to be anything other than roll up a character, roll some dice, kill some stuff, get treasure type A.
Right.
If you've not had that aha moment, and when you have it, that first time you have it, and I think that would be a great episode, by the way, for you guys, is to talk about your first aha moment. Until you've had that aha moment, you just don't get it. And none of this advice is going to land.
Well, because you have to have those experiences too. Do you feel that you do? Do you feel that you have to come through D&D to get to this higher thing, or can you just?
I don't think it has to be D&D, but I think you had to have had it in some game, right?
Right. Sure.
The greatest compliment I ever had as a game designer, a woman wrote me a letter, and she said, "I played one of your games the other night, and I realized I've been game mastering wrong for a decade, and I'm going to go back and rethink what I'm doing." And
Ooh, wow.
I realized I whether or not it's my fault or not, right? I realized that this woman had that aha moment. She had that holy shit moment, and it has changed her perspective of what gaming can do for her. And that's more important than me getting accolades for it, is that she finally had it. And now, yeah. I think I said.
I can't wait to be at a convention and meet that woman and be like, well, Jim Pinto said this was how I was supposed to play my game.
Oh crap!
That is the kind of shitty thing you might do. I love it. So I think, you know, when you are called upon to be agile at the table, what do you go to? Like, it sounds like you play mostly GM-less games, but there obviously was a period when that wasn't the case, and all of us can chime in on this, obviously. Like, what are those like when you have to pull people together or find a way to create that connection between them? Like, how do you practical advice? Like, how do you make that happen?
I was at a Midwest con, and I had an epiphany where I realized Midwesterners play very slow in comparison to how I play. And this isn't a condemnation. It's just a cultural thing. I grew up in LA. I grew up in a poor neighborhood, and I grew up where everybody was funny and smarter than I was. They really were. And I hated that as a kid.
Yeah, they were probably real pricks then.
And I hated that. And it forced me, even at the age of 8, I think, to get smart fast, to start thinking fast. And I don't think you can develop those tools without a desire to want to do it. And if you live in an environment where you're never in a hurry to do anything, how are you going to get your improv skills at the game table to move that quickly so that you're not slowing everybody down? It has to be something that you want to do. There has to be a desire to want to get better at gaming, or just to want to make sure that I used to game with this guy who would take 90 seconds to 2 minutes to figure out what his character was doing on his round in D&D. And I thought, we've gone around the table. It takes 10 minutes to go around the table. Why are you still thinking about what you want to do? It didn't make any sense to me. And he was one of those guys. He suffered from analysis paralysis. He was weighing every single option, and he wasn't just playing to play and letting the moment happen. And I think that's one of the things that you have to do. Stop treating it like a spreadsheet. Stop treating it like every decision has to be the optimal, perfect decision, and let the game unfold. And the same is true of game masters. You can make mistakes. It's okay.
Well, that's just good advice for everybody, right? Making mistakes is what's going to make it fun in any event. What about the rest of us? I mean, what do you guys do to, like, create that sense at the table when you feel like things might be going a little bit off the rails, the stories maybe being abandoned, that kind of stuff?
I think Jimmy will say that he just kills them.
I'm just going to say, you know, my canned answer.
He doesn't.
I just off one of them. Oh, that'd wake them all up. That'll get your storytelling going.
Yeah, I don't have a real deep answer, I guess. And my solution is normally to just represent, represent the decision at some point. So if they've gone off the rails and they come down, and maybe we'll go down this path for a little bit. But we've kind of talked about this before. Like I am more of I tend to write my own stuff, but I unfortunately am not a storyteller at heart, and I do a lot more start to finish type adventures. So if they go too far outside of my right and left lanes, then I have to bring them back. So I'll just present them with another question or another bit of evidence to point them back on track and get them back in my story.
What about you, Brian?
You know, I think I take a weird approach. No surprise. Like, I like giving my players 3 options at a time. So I'm kind of always seeding them with 3 paths that they can take, 3 things that they can do. And just the sheer opportunity there often has the players kind of arguing amongst themselves, or role-playing, or trying to, deduce things. And so that kind of drives a lot of the action. And then if things happen to get stale as they're moving down one of these paths, that's when I'll bust out a random encounter, or hey, you found this thing that has a little bit of clue, but instead of telling them, I'm showing them, right? So maybe they find some art that has some evidence in it, something along those lines, but mostly designed to spur the player characters themselves.
Yeah, I think those are all really good tactics to use. I think I back up from that question a little bit, and I go back to kind of first principles. I just ask, even during the game, I just ask my players for what I want, and I tell them what they can expect. I want meaningful choices. So I don't make mysteries out of like how to find the key to unlock the secret vault. I just say you're standing in front of the secret vault. Do you open it? That's the question. The question is not where the key is. The question is, are you willing to open this thing, or are you willing to do the next thing? And I'll sometimes feel like the story's veering off, and I'll just straight up say, this is kind of getting off the rails, guys. I'm going to leave for 10 minutes and go make a drink. Sort your shit out and figure out like what's really going on here, because like this is not, I don't think any of us is having fun right now. And usually people are like, yep, okay, cool. I come back in 10 minutes. They've talked as in character, whatever they're doing, if they're role playing at that level, and we move on. So I think you just ask for what you want.
There's nothing wrong with that either. Be direct.
Yeah. I don't want to waste my time either. That economy that Jim was talking about before of people don't want to give up their free time. I totally ran into that with my last game. I did a pitch doc, and I obviously, when I wrote the scenarios, there was obvious the systems that I was pitching, and they went right for 5e because they're like, we know it. It's ubiquitous. You can run anything in 5e you want to. I'm like, yeah, that's true. So let's just keep that rule set.
So there's something else I was going to bring up here too, you hit on a great topic. Like if the players are not engaged, if the players are not having fun or not having as much fun as they think they should be having, that's when you start seeing groups fragment and break down, when other things become more interesting and people splinter from the game or show up less often, right? So you're no nonsense of, hey, guys, I want to make sure that we're all having fun. That's important.
There's nothing wrong with a debriefing at the end of the session for 10 minutes, 15 minutes.
Absolutely.
And asking people, how do you feel right now? And I realize that that's a weird thing, because we as gamers don't talk about our feelings unless it's hate or love, because those are the only emotions we know how to express.
That's right.
But I think sitting down and saying, oh, you know what? I really didn't like that moment with the goblin sex because I felt really awkward. I think it's okay to say that. And we probably have built a culture where we feel it's not okay to say that.
Hashtag goblin sex is a thing now.
Yep.
With the hag consort.
Hag consort. Hashtag hag consort. Okay, so we're going to pause just real quick for a station ID right now. I know Matt's got some more questions coming up about backstories and campaigns and stuff. So
we're going to mute Brian.
What's that, Brian?
Mute Brian.
Wizards of the Couch, we've been kind of going 3 weeks in a row here, but every other week, first and third Mondays of every month. And we're here on Twitch, 9 p.m. till 10:30, and then we do last call after 10:30, talk about an interesting topic. You can find us all over social media. And I want to give a quick moment for Matt to do a shout out about his Kickstarter for Irafir.
We are at the end of week 1 of our Kickstarter. Thank you very much for the opportunity. So Irafir is industrialized magical revolution set in what would probably be the early 1920s or 30s, and if we were in real world Earth, on the continent of Irafir. Several new races, new classes, all kinds of fun stuff to play with, and it's Kickstarter.wizcogames.net if you'd like to go check it out and support us.
Right on. And also just want to give a big shout out to everybody who's been following us on the Wizards of the Couch Facebook page. We're going to have a contest. We're driving toward 2,500 supporters over there. We're going to be doing a giveaway. So go over to Wizards of the Couch on Facebook and check it out there. And you can also find out about what's coming up in the next couple of weeks as well. I think that's it. Yes. So Matt, why don't you go now and ask a question?
All right, so welcome to the Wizards Couch. tonight, my first question is going to be incorporating character backstories into your campaign, in campaign setting, and using these backstories to shape your story and your game. We've danced on this, I think, all night. So this may be short answers from everybody or repeat answers from everybody. But for the people like myself and like Jimmy, who tend to run more of a more written content, more book content, and for the Dannys and Brians and Jims of the world who are more interested in story-driven content, how do you let the characters shape that story, if at all? And I'll start with Brian on that one.
Sure. So I was having a problem with some of my players in my Ravenloft game not being heroic enough. And I flat out told everyone at the very beginning, the session 0, I was like, I want good characters. I want a strong backstory of why you were good, why you were sucked into Ravenloft, why the Domain of Dread wants to torment you, right? And some of the characters, their backstories were a little lacking. And so what I did was I engineered an encounter where the players were designed to save, some poor, hapless, old person that was getting attacked by zombies, nothing deep, right? So the players, of course, rush in, they defeat the zombies. Of course, the old man dies. Little girl who witnessed this at the end is like, why didn't you guys save him? I thought you were heroes.
Oh, stab.
Yeah. So that's the kind of stuff that you get in one of my games. Like I was subtly giving the players that hint, but in a very fun, throw gasoline on the fire sort of way.
Sure. Danny, how about you?
This just happened in an Arcana Evolved game that I was running end of last year into the beginning of this year. And again, it stemmed from that. It's the extension of Session 0. Session 0 kind of continues on a lot. There's a little part of it in every game where we kind of do that. I think Jim called it a post-game scrum or whatever the word he used, but like to discuss it. And
you dropped scrum.
I said post-game, hashtag post-game scrum. And what we would often do is we would talk before the game, and people would say, well, I'm on this path now where it looks like I'm going to become a priest. I didn't think that's what was going to happen, but looks like that's what they're headed. And then somebody else would chime in, well, that's kind of cool because if you did that, then this, and there would be this big conversation about the characters' backstories. Then we would go play. So it was like a pre-play, and this makes me feel like that's what I call like Session 0 all the time. It's the pre-playing and working some of this shit out, so when you're actually playing, it just comes off more fluidly.
By the way, SRM piped up that's better than a post-game scrot. So just...
Okay. I'm going to have to get... Steven's going to need to explain that to me. I'm from Milwaukee, so I don't really understand. Apparently, I play slow, and I don't know what a scrot is.
Oh, Jim, how about you?
I have so many ways of dealing with this. I don't know what answer to give you. I think one of the key ways to do it is important NPCs in the world need to be known, and the players need to have relationships with them from the get-go. And that's Dogs in the Vineyard taught me that one over a decade ago, is that the characters if the characters are going to be important, they're going to be important. You need to make sure that they're important in those kind of ways. And if they're not going to be important, if they're going to be gutter fantasy, they still need to know somebody. They can't be orphans in the society. There need to be NPCs that they've established with one another. And I've done that a number of different ways. Where I'll ask, which of you is the most closely related to the prince? And even if they're not even related to him at all, they still need to know what their ranking of relationship is, so they know who's going to go and talk to important NPCs like that in those moments.
Sure.
Who's the oldest here, right? That's a great question to ask. Who's the oldest? That gives you a sense of mentorship of who kind of takes the reins for the other characters. If somebody's only 14, like a thief might be in first edition D&D, that person hasn't had a lot of life experience versus somebody that's 55. So if a character decides I'm 55, even though I'm only a first level druid or whatever, they still have had a lot more life experience, and people understanding how you relate to one another is important. So that sort of, I hope that sort of addresses that in one way. I can't give every single way to do it, but characters are absolute orphans in the world and they don't have relationships to anybody. They're never going to be anchored to the story you're trying to write.
I would love your 20 questions for fantasy characters, Jim. That'd be great.
Blood Wraith, I wrote 20 questions.
Did you?
For characters in that world. And I think what people should do is they should have 20 world specific questions. They shouldn't just have 20 generic ones. And I made a deck of tool cards that does that too. I've probably written these kinds of questions for gaming. I've probably written somewhere in the neighborhood of about 2,000 questions. So for me, these kinds of questions. What's that?
That might be a bit many.
Well, yeah. Well, you don't use them all for every session. You pick and choose, right? But every protocol I write comes with 10 questions. Every praxis character I write has at least 2 questions written on them to help you get started. And then my deck has, I don't know, that's another 300 on those decks, I think, of character building questions. And then inside each book, I did the extra 20 questions for the L5R survival guide. So if you'd use those 20 questions a lot already, here's 20 more that are a little more refined, a little more specific. And I think game masters should feel competent enough with their new game worlds, right? Matt's got something coming. He was just talking about his Kickstarter. I think he should absolutely have 20 world specific questions that go into that.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I'm writing that note down right now.
Yeah.
You should have said, I already have it, Jim.
Yeah, exactly. That's done. It's in the can.
Keep your advice to yourself, pal.
Yeah, I think it's funny that you mentioned L5R because that attachment to NPCs was really important in that game. And also the idea of the 20 questions. We use those exhaustively for development.
Yeah, 2,000 development questions, 999. Question 999 is, if you answered yes to 998, you die. Start over. Reroll your character. Jimmy, what about you, Ben?
Well, yeah, we've talked about it somewhat in the past because of the platform, which is that I'm a streamer, a digital gamer, and all that. The stories that I run are basically the published work, and so it's been interesting. We're having this discussion about that backstory, but then all these other pieces. How do we get the storytelling when it's already in a book? How do I expand off of it when my players are coming in? I've got a timeline. I've got an agenda to move through, and I've got to deal with the dice rolling, which Jim has come out with. And we're talking about again, maybe not against, but I've got to get into role playing side. But I've got the dice rolling that I've got to deal with, and I've got the players who have this a lot, and I'm not going to disagree with what Jimmy said, is that they've got this conceived notion they got to kill everything. This is how they get their XP, and this has been going on a little bit more. We've talked some. I've been toying with changing that up because I'm kind of a little tired of it.
Absolutely.
The question on the virtual side, and you'll see in the channels that you're seeing happening in Twitch, is we have a huge set of role playing, and there's not much dice going on. And then you've got the side where I came in on, and that was all the dice rolling was going on. And that's what it really boiled down to, and the maps and having all that. And where's that middle? I'm not sure. I don't know where
the dice. Yet. Yeah, rolling the dice on a computer game. I mean, that's what's exciting to everybody, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think this would be interesting for people who run the game pretty straight, because how much do you want to let player background play a role? I mean,
I make them. Yeah, to answer the question, I went all over the place there. But I've always asked my characters to make pertinent. When they roll up their backstories. Yeah, and you hate that because they're rolling it up because a lot of them aren't able to take that steps. They roll it and they use them. Then you have those that are very comfortable, and they'll give you the Bible on everything that's going on about their character. But I've also asked always, I want something extra dark about your character because you are a reject, which is part of the channel that not everybody knows. And how then I haven't used it a lot, but I'm trying to get them to put that in their gameplay. If they know this, then that is their crutch. That is their motivation of what they're doing, and the other characters may not know about it, and they got to figure that out some. And I'm very bad about getting more of that to the table, and I have to work on it. So, ta-da.
Sure. Yeah. So I think you and I share pretty similar, I guess, methodology in the way that we run through games, and we have a problem on the story side when people want to kind of break out of the box that we've written or that we're running, for example. And then the other three, who are all primarily like storytellers, they want the characters, or the players rather, to push the boundaries. I see the way that the discussion that we've been having tonight, it seems to me that it would be more difficult for the people that are trying to play the written content. In particular for D&D, it seems like it would be more difficult for the type of gamer that's being created through watching Critical Role and wanting to do a story type adventure. Seems like it would be really difficult for a DM, a new DM in particular, to go, hey, I'm going to take this written adventure for what's the Waterdeep one?
Dragon Heist.
Yep.
Seems like it would be really difficult to take, all right, new GM, here's Dragon Heist, take this and run your players who want to tell a super cool story about their character, run through it. I mean, it seems like it's like a dichotomy there, right?
Yep.
Cool. All right.
Yeah, I don't know if there is. I mean, can't you just skip? I mean, I guess if the players are there, they're not going to be concerned about going through every encounter, right? If those players want to tell those great stories and they want to work on character development, then whatever you put in front of them, whatever the first thing you read out of Dragon Heist, if they're firing on all 8, they're going to start like saying, well, what kind of, what's this and what's that? And I think if they bring something, maybe that's the answer, is if you find the right players, maybe they bring that aspect and you don't have to do it.
Yeah, and I don't mean to suggest that because they're a new GM or because they bought the material that they have to stick to it. I would strongly encourage anybody who's able to do it to think on the fly, to do that, and to branch out and let the story grow with the players. That's not at all. I didn't mean that they have to.
Right.
Just that somebody who's reading the material. There's not a lot of fluff in a published work that says, okay, if they go out this route, here's a storyline that you can take. Right? I mean,
Well, I've been vocal about Dragon Heist and how much I like it because it has been different from their previous works in that you watch the Thursday Night Crew that I have, they've just now gotten to the tavern to run this tavern now. And it was a stop there because they went, what? Now you've got to pause in your storyline. Y'all have to figure this out now. And what's going to happen, you're in downtime mode basically, and y'all don't know when the next clue or the next part of that story is going to fire off, and I'm not telling you when. So, and how do they fit? And they're going, what? This group is very interesting because it's very different from the last time I ran it. And so this group, I think, is a little bit more better on the story side, but I've got a couple of guys that are just the rollers. And so I'm going to be interested to see how they begin to move forward with the building of the tavern and go through with it. So,
yeah, from a production standpoint, it has to be a nightmare to have to juggle all that stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
One of the most important tools I think you can have when you're designing a game is addressing the reward system. And rewards, more than anything, influence player behavior. You can write whatever rules you want to penalizing things, but if your reward is you're only going to get XP for doing X, Y, or Z, they're going to stop killing stuff and they're going to go chase those 3 values.
Right.
Exactly.
And I use drama points in just about everything that I make, and drama points are points you use to break the rules. If D&D had drama points, or in this case, I think they do advantages right now, and
let me
gave out advantages every single time they did something within those parameters. That reward system would get chased.
Well, so yeah, we're moving into fulfilling, story goals in a digital game. And so to throw that curveball to you when you're talking about the reward, the drama point, expound upon that a little bit. What do you mean by that?
What do I mean by what about drama points?
Yeah.
How much can they break the rules?
Yeah,
Like how much
yeah.
can they do?
Well, I mean, I use them in most of my GMless games, but in the context of D&D, you break the rules in a way you get an extra action in a round, or you get to run across a room without worrying about attacks of opportunity, or you get a one-on-one with the villain across the room and people can't interrupt you, right? Breaking the rules in that way, there's an obvious social contract there, right? Somebody that wants to break the rules in a ridiculous way where all of a sudden they have a rod of Lurtly Might and they summon a meteor storm on top of the entire dungeon, that's just stupid, and that's more of that kind of game winning mentality. The drama points are supposed to represent your ability to do things and put the spotlight on you in ways you normally couldn't.
No, I like that term, and I'm wondering, like, here I'm already turning in a virtual world, how, yes, you are correct, it's an advantage, or if they come up with this question, can I do this, and it's got some forethought in it. It's not just dropping a meteor storm down on something. That is, I don't think that makes sense. But if they ask, can I do this in this circumstance, and when this happens, and they've thought it up a little bit, roll that up with advantage. Let me see if it happens, and then describe what goes down for the game, because that is now outside of that particular rule, or what is the context for what you're doing at that moment. I love that idea. You've just given me something to work on there, Jim.
Your players
you
are
got
quick.
that for free. You normally have to pay $9.95 for that kind of device.
That's the value of having Jim Pinto on your show. Value.
You guys have my address for the residual checks.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Talk about that.
Yes.
Devil Dog, or it's the Tarrasque that you keep bringing up.
My agent was very clear before I came on the show.
No,
I get flowers in my dressing room, and I get a residual check.
Well, I use something, because we're talking about in the digital world. Yes, there's inspiration, or we'll give out more than one, or depending on, what are the fulfilling, how else can you drive the story along and meet the goals in a virtual side. I think that this is a different realm of question when you're maybe at the tabletop, in real life and all that, because there's a different dichotomy and interaction that's going on. But on my side, there's inspiration cards, or they can get, I also have stuff that can happen from the viewers who are watching the stream. They can influence that game, and here comes some of those bit that can happen when they players weren't expecting it, but here comes the healing potion out of nowhere, or there comes the short rest. And that changes that game flow up a little bit. So
I just wanted to close out before Brian asks his question. I just wanted to say this is one of the things that I loved about L5R was the bidding that you could do. So I've ported it over to 5e, where if you say, well, what's it going to take to walk the tightrope between the two buildings? And I say, well, it's a 12. And they're like, what if I want to do it on my hands, so that everybody in the street down below recognizes that I am the night cat as written in my background? I want them to see me do it. Okay, that's a 22. They make that check. Now it's furthered their own background. It's furthered their character development. And I love the idea of people will bid up. If you want to do the basic, great, you hit the guy. If you want to bid up, I'll let you take control of the game for a second and have it be the way you want it to be. You do walk across on your tiptoes and do the magical thing or whatever. And that's something you can do virtually or not. You just let people increase their difficulty voluntarily to do cool story shit.
Yeah, for sure. And I think some of the mechanics that Jimmy's talking about do take some more tracking on the part of the game master. But what you're saying, and with the way Five Rings works, that would absolutely work. That would certainly work even in a 5e game.
It points out that people have agency. They can choose to do harder things. That's what I like about it.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
So, Jimmy, you're talking about running a virtual game, right? Online. And it's more of a challenge because you do have all these other things going on. It plays out maybe a little bit more like a video game than a role-playing game. And that's not me being condescending. That's how it is, right?
Yeah.
So I swear Jim was peeking at my notes, but I wanted to talk to you about Milestone XP. because what he said is absolutely true. If you reward the players, however you choose to reward them, whatever situations earn them experience points, that's what they're going to go after. So if monsters are no longer the primary driver of earning XP, if fulfilling and advancing the story, if role playing, if those things are what really drives the game forward, and that's how you award your XP, man, player, change it, like that's going to just change overnight. Suddenly that band of goblins that we could go crush, maybe they're just not worth our time. We're going to go move on to this other thing that's going to help move the story forward.
I'm heavily wanting to move a show that direction. So, and see what happens with the changes, especially on the virtual side. Because as we talked about, Matt brought up the Critical Role, and everybody aspires to be like them. But there's a whole another section over here that I think is the gameplay of still the dice interaction, and still, I like all their role playing, but it's different. It's not, I don't want to say it's not the true play, but it's, the number of times we get across the channel, this isn't Critical Role, this is crap. Well, hey, then you're missing the point. Hey, hold on, So yes, milestone XP I want to favor. I want to work it into. They draw the books. The books are put up and they have those section off some, but it's still, there's a driving force with the players. They still want their XP for killing that goblin.
Of course they do, because it's baked into the system.
Yeah.
But you take that away, then you have to determine what the game is about. What is it about for you? What is it about for your players, right? Jim clearly defines that in the beginning of his games. Right, Protocol plays very differently than Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's a completely different animal.
I'd like to see lower or fewer level. If we're talking D&D strictly, I'd like to see fewer levels, because the majority of the good times that even in my group today, the majority of the good times that I have with my character, knowing that it's really kind of dangerous.
Hashtag good times with characters.
Yeah.
Go on.
Are definitely under 10th, and a lot of times like 8th, maybe 3rd through 8th level for me is the quote unquote sweet spot. It gets to the point after 8th level in D&D, or Pathfinder, it just gets to the point where you're getting more powerful, but they're just going to throw more powerful monsters at you, and at that point you are just counting numbers, right? You need to have there should be something else that you're working for, some sort of milestone, to your point.
I call a talisman widget gaming. The number you need to roll at the beginning of the game and at the end of the game are the same exact thing. You're collecting bonuses all the way through the game.
Correct.
So that you can actually do the thing at the end to roll the same number on a D6. And that's what D&D has become with that scaling, is I still need to roll a 13 to hit something, even though I've got a plus 30 now to attack at 15th level. It doesn't matter. I still need to roll at least a 13 to hit it, because the ACs have gone up at the same rate.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's the ultimate evolution when you decide, well, whether they decided or not, but I think there was a decision to grab a bigger audience. So they did at least some modicum of research and realized here's the kind of game it needs to become. And they had a blessed reprieve where 4th edition wasn't super well received. So, they had time while that kind of played itself out to eventually create what we have now. I enjoy playing it, but it's not my favorite. It's nowhere near my favorite system to play.
Yeah, I enjoy playing it because you can just kind of let loose and not really focus on the rules. You don't have to focus on how crunchy the rules are. If I want to get crunchy, I go to Pathfinder. And if I want to, fine tune and get all my feats and get all my skills and make sure that I've got my all my stats doped out, I'll go over to Pathfinder, and that's fun for me to play too. It's just not the same type of experience that I usually have playing 5th edition or D&D. Yeah, 5th edition specifically.
Yeah.
So Matt, would you say that character arcs are part of the experience that you're looking for you developing that character, especially at those low levels, from the hero's journey, right? Like you're nobody, then you are, tutored by the wizened so and so, and then you become the hero and ultimately defeat the evil, and then now you're somebody, right? Is that kind of the fulfillment that you're looking for in a game?
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to get Jim blocking me on Facebook for saying some of this stuff, but
Hold on, I'm getting my finger ready. Go ahead.
That doesn't work. Stab him, Jim. Stab him.
D&D has very much tempered my 5th edition has very much tempered my desire to create this super long character arc where I cover your ears, Jim, where I will stout out a character in Pathfinder for at least 12 levels. Probably if I'm bored, I'll go all the way to 20, even though we never make it there. And I will focus on what in my head that character is going to be doing at any given point. So it has very little to do with the story arc. Is it an evil campaign? We're doing, we're playing the Pathfinder, the evil Pathfinder campaign right now, and the name is of course escaping me because I'm on live, but Hell's Vengeance. We're doing that right now. And sure, I made an evil themed character because the campaign itself is evil, but I didn't really take into consideration what I was creating because of what I knew the story arc was going to be, or what I thought the story arc was going to be. I created an evil character that I've always wanted to play. I statted it out for several levels, and that my fulfillment is the XP or the level gain, not how I'm interacting with the game. D&D 5th edition, on the other hand, I find that is less true. I'm far more interested because there's not as much crunch. And like I said before, sometimes I want crunch, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I just want to sit down and relax and play and role play my character. 5th edition, I am far more interested because of the way the rules work. I'm far more interested in the story and figuring out how I can interact with it. That was long-winded. I think that answered your question.
The only thing I would add on to what he just said is, in my world, the worlds I run, I don't think you can create a character. There's no way for you to create a character that can break my story, because you're still just a character in the story. Maybe you're the min-maxed guy. Fine, then you're the min-maxed guy, and I can have that guy in my game. He's going to be the guy who's going to run forward and do cool shit. Or I can have the social player who only wants to pipe up twice a night just to say, I definitely pick their pockets. I definitely do that. And I feel like almost anybody could be ready for that. You don't prep too much, just keep it loose at the beginning. And eventually people kind of fall into their roles, and don't be afraid to tell someone, hey, dude, you're hogging the spotlight. Back up, let someone else have the mic. That's something that's been told to me every week here.
I'm glad you learned your lesson.
Yeah. I'm afraid that I'm immune to lesson learning, but I just tell people, share.
But that's your cue to share, Brian.
I feel like I have almost gone the opposite route. Like I have started designing half the characters. Like if I want to tell a story, I will design half the character for the players. I will give them a list of great character concepts that fit really, really well within the story, and still give them enough of that character skeleton to fill in so that they feel invested. Because I don't want the broken character who was a build that can do all the awesome one-trick pony stuff. I'm not interested in that. That is not fun for me, and it's not fun for the other players, which is a whole nother topic unto itself. But
yeah,
I want to pull this together with something Jimmy said earlier when he's talking about dealing with getting the players invested. And there's a lot of stuff you can do in Flashback. You don't have to nail everything down at the beginning of your campaign.
Good call.
And if you want to find out why your character hates an orc, for instance, or just hates orcs in general without reason, just total racist against orcs, you can have a flashback scene at some point during the game to explore exactly why that happened. And I think nailing everything down ahead of time can also be a hindrance, right? Too much of a ball and chain around your ankle to hold you back from gaming. If you're going to sit there and plot out everything, and I can see why you would want to do that, plot out your Pathfinder character ahead of time, because you're spreadsheeting the game, quote unquote, rather than telling a story. That's fine. That's a different style of play. And I don't mind sitting down and playing crunchy games, but I also don't expect the same rich story out of them that I would expect out of a game that gave me different tools. So you as a game master, if you're going to do that, let's say with Pathfinder, you still have to bring other tools to the table because they're just not baked in.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
I was all over the place there. I apologize.
How much am I going to have to pay you now, Jim? Just let me know. Yeah.
I get paid 10 cents a word. So how many words did I say?
Oh boy.
That explains a lot.
We can afford 10.
I've never been paid 10 cents a word.
We need more Patreons, folks. Sign them now. He just broke us.
This would be a perfect time to plug our advertisements.
Please.
Yeah.
Please. Help me.
So this has been a really welcome and very interesting. I think we deviated off the topic sometimes, but like that's okay because we were all Brian's like, really? Every word as written. But I think it was really useful. Thanks so much to Jim Pinto for being here tonight and sharing just like what it takes to create a meaningful experience that enhances the story and takes a story forward. And then allowing us to kind of talk a little bit about other systems that are not GM-less, that like how to apply some of those rules to those experiences as well. So thank you, Jim, and thanks to everybody else here. We have a Kickstarter going. We are on social media everywhere. We're trying to keep the posts going. We obviously, please go check us out. If you're liking the content you're seeing here or listening to on Spotify or seeing again later in the week on YouTube, please let us know. Leave comments. We're always taking ideas for the show too. So if you have ideas, questions you want to ask, please let us know. Matt, we usually do our couch question. We didn't do one tonight, but we're always looking for that kind of stuff. So anything else, guys?
Last call.
I think we're gonna roll in the last call. Check out the Kickstarter. Where is it, Matt?
Kickstarter is at kickstarter.wizcogames.net.
If you are interested in playing a game in a techno science world that has intrigue and murder and a look at the dark underbelly of the societies that we're creating in this world, you definitely should kickstart this thing. There's going to be 4 modules starting. They're all awesome. Wouldn't you agree, Matt?
Yeah, well, I certainly agree that they're awesome. I would also say that
he wrote them.
If you're interested in playing them, the next session that we'll be playing is at Gamehole Con, right?
Correct.
No, that's not correct. That's
Jim,
we're playing.
Jim, you come out to Gamehole Con.
TsunamiCon. I will be running them at TsunamiCon, which is 2 weeks before Gamehole Con.
Correct.
And then we've got a big session planned for Gamehole Con.
Yep. Yeah, so people who have been keeping a look out on the Facebook group because we will be pimping what we're doing at Gamehole Con. We're doing a whole bunch of different stuff, so there'll be something for everybody, including a big miniatures battle if we can pull it off with our big ships. So I guess that's it, everybody. Jim, thanks again for being here. Fellow Wizards, thanks a lot. We're going to the last call.
We'll be back in a few minutes.
Back in a few. We're going to take a proper break now.